The story of the fall of man, as portrayed in Genesis, is one of the iconic myths of the Western tradition. Moreover, it's been the subject of endless theological debate. It's also been the inspiration for many artists and poets. We all know the story. In the garden where the first humans, Adam and Eve, lived, there are two trees: the tree of life, which grants immortality, and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. God explains to Adam and Eve that they may not eat of the latter. About the former, nothing is said. He threatens that if they disobey this prohibition, they will die on the same day. The snake, however, persuades Eve to eat from the tree. Eve then goes ahead and eats the fruit and gives some to her husband, who also eats. As a result, they learn knowledge of good and evil. A change comes over them, and they realize for the first time that they're naked. They feel shame and hasten to make loincloths for themselves. When God discovers this, he punishes them both. Eve is punished by having to bear intense pain in childbirth, and Adam by having to earn his living with great labor by working the land. God then sends them out of the garden so that they will not eat of the other tree, that is, the tree of life, and he places a guard in order to prevent them from returning. What does this story tell us about the Hebrews' conception of human nature and their relation to God and the world? At first, Adam and Eve lived like the animals. They went naked. They had all their needs prepared for them by nature. They were in harmony with nature. Then, after the fall, this harmony is broken. Humans become different from nature by virtue of knowledge of good and evil. Animals have no such knowledge and live by instinct. If that instinct tells a lion to kill and eat its prey, then that's what it does. There's no question of any ethical reflection involved in this. By contrast, humans have this reflection. Their actions must be judged differently. However, this knowledge of good and evil is not something that we are immediately born with. We've learned it through many years of upbringing in our childhood and adolescence. This is represented in the story of Adam and Eve's new awareness of shame and their desire to cover themselves. Small children also know no shame. Like animals, they're unaware that they're naked. Shame is something that children learn when their parents teach them about right and wrong. The movement away from nature is also characterized, so to speak, by a movement towards the divine. By eating from the tree, the first humans become like God in some respect. Indeed, this seems to be a kind of threat to God that precipitates him to exile the first humans so that they don't have a chance to eat from the tree of life as well, which would presumably give them immortality and thus make them like him in yet another respect. The story of the fall is clearly portrayed as a negative one. This was a terrible event that should never have happened. Humans should have remained in the paradise of the garden in the way that God intended. In many cultures, there's a myth about some early time when everything was better and humans were happier, such as the idea of a golden age that we see in Hesiod or Ovid. This was an age when humans were in harmony with nature and when they fraternized with the gods on amicable terms. Such an age is always intended as a sort of critical mirror that is to be held up to the present in order to expose the corruption and vice of the present day. Life in the Garden of Eden is how things were supposed to be, how God wanted them to be, but this was all ruined by human sinfulness. So the picture of human beings that's presented here is like animals or children. They should not know good and evil. Life would be better without this knowledge, or to put it differently, knowledge is dangerous. In terms of the Epic of Gilgamesh, it would have been better for Enkidu if he had never left his home in the woods and fields and allowed himself to be civilized. From our modern perspective, there's something striking about this. To be fully human, it's necessary that we have knowledge of good and evil. Of course, this means that there will be some people who choose evil, but the capacity to make this choice is absolutely fundamental to what makes us human and separates us from the animals. This point is also reflected in God's punishment of Adam. While it might immediately sound nice to not to have to work for a living and to have everything immediately provided for us, it's an important part of who we are, that we must do so. By working, we learn new things and develop our intelligence and skills. The very fact that we have to work is not a negative thing, a punishment, but a positive thing that touches the heart of our humanity, individuality, and personal identity. Humans were not meant to remain in the garden, although this is the implication of the story. Humans have to leave the paradise in order to become fully human.